Session is being recorded. All right, so I think I am live. Let me just make sure that it's working. If you can see me, please respond in the chat box. I'm going to send the box. Just got to make sure that everyone can see me. Right. No one has responded yet. Can you put a yes if you can see me in the chat box? If you're logged in, or if you can chat, maybe some of us don't. Okay, I see some people. Okay, awesome, thank you. I see some hands, some people pressing their question marks. Okay, awesome. Great, great, great. All right. So thank you so much for registering today for this webinar. It's called a free and appropriate education. So how can we provide a free and appropriate education to diverse learners during school closures? So I know right now for our school leaders, most of us are extremely busy trying to get everything situated and off the ground when it comes to the curriculum and the learning programs that we're putting together for our students. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune in and to engage in this discussion about ways that we can provide flexible ways to continue to educate our students. So let's get started. I'll start off with a little bit about myself. Hi everyone, my name is Gabriella Timothy, and I am a special educator, special education leader, and an education consultant for Learn Potential. And Learn Potential is an education consulting firm. I work primarily in Pennsylvania, but I also work in New Jersey, Delaware, and I've worked with schools all over. I've been in education field for the past 9 years. I started off as a site director at a local school in Philadelphia, and we worked on out-of-school time services, mentoring program services, and then from there I transitioned into teaching full-time as a special educator in charter schools in Philadelphia, and became a coordinator of services, and then transitioned over to becoming a program manager for the school district of Philadelphia. So right now, I'm working with schools in a more supportive fashion in mainly areas like special education because of my background in there. And of course, we all know that that's a very high need area. And I'm also currently doing education research as a doctoral candidate for universal design learning, cultural responsive practices, special education, multi-tiered support systems, and looking for ways to incorporate all of those into one. So that's a little bit about me, and also about Learn Potential, which is what I founded back in 2017 and originally started as a learning specialist practice. So I would go to families, work with their students that have specific learning disabilities, and help them with multisensory practices and strategies. So that was the main way that I worked with those families, in addition to like consulting with them, like helping them understand how to support their students and how to advocate for their students at their schools. And then from there, I worked, the learning specialist was while I was still working for schools and then transitioning into the district. And in 2018, I left the district full time to work as a consultant full time, and then expanded, of course, to supporting those services to charter schools. So right now, Learn Potential is in Pennsylvania, Jersey, Delaware, New York, DMV, all over, and our services include organizational compliance, helping schools with like enrollment policy, disciplinary structures, and so on, and also positive behavior support, and mainly right now, a lot of special education compliance. That's like the big ticket item. And of course, charter renewal support, parent consulting and training. And we're now expanding to doing online tutoring services through our company, Tutor Potential. So that's a little bit about myself and Learn Potential. So let's talk mainly about why we're here today. And I want to start off with a quote by Albert Einstein. It says, "The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." So if you think about where we are right now, a lot of things have changed. So we're delivering instruction face to face for a lot of students for forever. And now we're at a time where we have to still continue that instruction through different platforms. So many of us are doing it digital platforms. Many of us are doing it through sending home information, phone calls. So we're just being very flexible in the way that we're delivering services. And we also have to change the way of how do we educate students, because this is a time that's incredibly important. So I want to start off with just some agenda items. So as we go through this presentation today, we're just going to talk about some key terms, and I'm going to start off with key terms because I know most of us here are familiar with special education, but I do have some participants that are not. So I want to make sure that everyone is aware of just diverse learners, what that means, in addition to what a free and appropriate education is, and what are the mandates for that. And of course, we're going to go into just a school closure overview, federal response, continuity of education, how do we provide a free and appropriate public education, which we call FAPE, documenting efforts, and flexible remote learning examples for our students. If you can, I know we can do the labels with your hand up and all that. If you can write in a chat box, I want to make sure that the chat box is actually working. Maybe I have to pose a question. Oh, okay, I see it. Never mind, guys. Okay, I found it. I was looking in the wrong one. So everyone, okay, I can see it. Great. All right, back to regular schedule program. So let's talk about some key terms right now. And what that means. So let's start off with diverse learners. So we'll start off with just back in 2010, there was a revision to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act passed by the US government, and it highlighted diverse learners. And those are students with disabilities, migrant students, homeless students, neglected or delinquent students, Native American students, and students in high need or rural areas. So when we think about diverse, the diverse circumstances and backgrounds of the students would be considered a diverse learner. So to summarize what a diverse learner is, you would say students from racially, ethnically, culturally, and linguistically diverse families and communities of lower socioeconomic status, and of course students who learn differently. So those would be considered diverse students. So that's a definition for those of us who may just need some clarification or just a better understanding of that. And free and appropriate public education, that is our right to students. So the government have mandated that we should be providing all students, regardless of ability, with a free and appropriate public education. And what that means is any federally funded program as a school should be providing these services for students for free. And those services are designed to meet the needs of the students adequately, in addition to meeting the needs of students to the maximum extent appropriate. So as much as we can do to meet that student's need, that's what the school should be doing. And our evaluation procedure. So if we're evaluating students, we need, part of that is our evaluation procedures for students. So we should be seeing and evaluating them on a regular process to ensure that the services that we're providing, the education that we're providing, is meeting their needs. And then of course, parents' rights. So as a parent, you have a right to be noticed be provided with notices of your students' education placement, meetings, services, communication, and also records. So having access to your child records, in addition to challenging any decisions that the schools make. So those are just a summary of what what students deserve when we think about the free and appropriate public education. All right, the next one, just a little quote about when not gonna read, I'm gonna just leave that there, but it talks about just the right to education and how that creates freedom. So we always got to think about the importance of an education for our students and the opportunities that a strong education can provide for our students. So I'll send this, you guys can get to read that later, but it's a great quote. So school closures. So we are, schools have been closed for many of different, in the past, schools have been closed for many of different reasons, including snowstorms, but we're in a very, very unique time where this, in my lifetime, and I'm sure many of us have never happened, for schools to be closed to this amount, this extent and of course across the board for many states. So many states have decided to close for the remainder of the school year. I know in Pennsylvania it's indefinitely, so we're trying to hang on to find out what that means, but we do know that schools should be planning accordingly. Oops, sorry, went back. Um, so like I said before, schools are closed indefinitely. Like California, for example, Virginia, they've decided to close for the remainder of the year. So all of our schools at this point should be planning accordingly because we might be next. We don't know, but we want to make sure that we're ready for anything that's coming up. And as far as where we are in the process, all schools at this point are transitioning to a unique learning format. Some schools are already familiar with distance learning and virtual learning, and some schools are not. So we are at all different parts of this process. I know that many of them, I know that many of the schools right now are just planning out and deciding where they are. So I'm going to share, this was taken from the Council of Exceptional Children, and they provided just some guidance, like where should we be when we're thinking about the continuum of our efforts. So if we're in the red, which we all are, we know that schools at this point have officially closed. And there was a period of time where maybe a few days and maybe a few weeks that schools were not providing any services to students. So that likely was because they were just trying to figure out what to do. In this process, most schools were just planning like, what does this mean? What should we do? Where should we go from here? Now, and I know the Philadelphia School District has also done this, but they started the next level of that was providing homework or work home to students. So that was either being mailed home, that was being parents and families were coming to pick it up, and also they were making it available on the website so that students and their families can download the homework packets. So these were activities, resources just immediately that students can do, so that way they're still being engaged throughout the process. So the next part of that would be the yellow. Let me see if I have a spotlight here. So the next part of that will be the yellow, where we're talking about continuous learning opportunities. So that's a mixture. That is ways to engage students, ways to send homework, ways to share information. It's just where most schools at this point are just kind of learning like what works, what can we do, what do we have access to. That is our yellow part. Like we're kind of going back and forth between those two. And we even have some schools at this point that have a full setup distance learning process. And that is excellent. You know, like the activities are structured, everything is set and it's ongoing. It's just a matter of that weekly update and engagement of the parents. So if you're a school that's there right now, excellent. That's, you know, we do have many schools that are there, and I think mainly because of having prior experience with virtual learning. So providing students with laptops or resources way before this happened. So it made it a lot easier for them to kind of just move to that format. And then the very last part in the green is what we're all hoping to get to sooner than later, is being to a place where we're completely open again and it's safe for us to go back to school. But for right now, we're between those three parts, between the red, the yellow, and the green. So my question now to some of our school leaders, where are you in, oops, okay, next, oh, sorry. All right, where are you in the process? So I'm gonna set up a poll right now for us to do that once I am able to get this pointer off. Okay, I think I'm good. All right, so where is your school? If you are a school leader, if you're at a school, where is your school in the process? If you're not, then where, and you're familiar with a school, or you're even a parent. If you're a parent and your child is at a school, where are you in the process? So I'm gonna send this poll out for you right now. And you're just going to respond. Oops, sorry, that was the wrong one. I was supposed to ask you guys how you're feeling. So let's start with that one. So the first poll I'm gonna launch right now is, how are you feeling? That was, I guess I breezed over that one. But the options are you optimistic about what's to come next? Are you stressed, overwhelmed? Are you feeling anxious? Are you sad? Or are you not even sure? Like, think about everything that's happening right now. Gonna hold the poll open for a few more seconds and just click as to where we are. All right, in a few more seconds, closing the poll. All right. And all right, so I'm gonna close it now. And I think, am I able to show the poll? Oh, I can share it. All right, perfect. So if I'm sharing the poll right now, how we're feeling, 38% of us are optimistic. That's great. I'm in that boat as well. And stressed and overwhelmed. I know we kind of, no one has said that part, but we probably have graduated from that. And majority of us at this point are very anxious. And I'm not gonna lie, the same here too. Like, just to see what's happening next. The news is changing every day. We don't know what to expect. This is all new to us. So how you're feeling right now is perfectly normal. And then of course, those of us who are not even sure, and I get it, because you're probably 1 minute in the morning, you change it by the afternoon, depending on how the news goes. So thank you for participating in that poll. I'm going to drop the other poll in regards to your schools. So if you are at a school now, or if you know where your school is, let's talk about where you are in the process. So is your school currently doing homework packets? Are you at the phase where you're doing continuous learning opportunities for teachers and families? Are you in a full distance learning program? Is that set, like it's done, we're good? Or are you back and forth between all three stages? And if you're not, if you're a parent too, you can also answer this as to like where your student is, or where your niece or nephew or cousin, you know, it's like somewhere in this process. Okay, awesome, awesome. Okay, great, great, great. So we're at, okay, so majority of us at this point, and I'll share the results, are at homework packets. I'm gonna close this now. Thank you for voting. And I share the results. Majority of us at this point are at homework packets, 43%, which is normal. Continuous learning process, 14%, that's great. Full distance, like thumbs up, like kudos to schools that are in that process, because that is a big deal. And then we're also back and forth, because we're going to be back and forth a lot, because we're learning what works and what doesn't work, and we're also thinking about what students are able to access what we have now. So thank you guys for participating in that. So let's talk about the federal response to our federal response to this school closure period and what that means for our students. So right now, I'm going to just highlight some parts where it says school districts must provide free and appropriate public education. So that is our right as a school district to provide whatever extent possible to our students. Also, let's talk about how the offices recognize that there are exceptional circumstances. So we know that everyone is different, and in this particular circumstance with the COVID-19, this is unprecedented, which is a word that I know everyone hears a lot. And it is unique. Like, we have to figure it out as we go. So we want to be able to provide the distance learning, whether it's telephone, online, virtual, however, and it's flexible as to how we can provide those services. The next part, let's talk about and of course I add questions as you go. Let me see if I have any. All right, none. I'll have an opportunity after this slide, I believe, where we're going to go through some questions. The stimulus funding. So as of March 21st of last Friday, or the Friday before, there was some language in the stimulus package for education, and it's specified IDEA funding, so providing services and supports for students. So IDEA is the Individual Disabilities Education Act, and it's like the overarching law for special education and providing special education services. So there was some funding for that, and it related to services. So any kind of services provided under that is eligible for the funding. Education technology, so hardware, software, connectivity. They didn't really go into detail in relation to internet services, but I'm sure there'll be some language around that. Mental health services. So we know that our students are going to need a lot of support and counseling to get through everything that's going on, especially if they have any family members that are being impacted by the virus. So we need to make sure that we're providing those supports for those students. And then summer learning programs. So there will be some regression for students. So you're going to have students that are going to miss a lot of time. And you have students that we may not even be able to reach throughout this process. So the summertime and of course next school year, we have to think about how we're going to support those students. And there is funding for programs, online programs, classroom programs to support those students. So what this means is that schools should provide free and appropriate education during closures, and schools have flexibility on how those services are delivered. So schools will now have additional funding to provide those services for students with IEPs, and of course, as this progresses, there's going to be more and more language about and I thank you for that. So thank you, Ellen. She asked the question about Act 13, and then there was, and I'll talk about that in a second, but there was a notice that was sent about that. And as we get into that, I'll make sure to address that question as we go. So let's talk about continuity of education. So we're discussing how can we continue the services of students, because that is the big overall question here. Like, how can we make sure that we are providing our students with these supports, and also making sure that we are respecting and following the guidelines of their IEP. So these are some frequently asked questions that have come up throughout, and I want to make sure that we take time to address those questions and what they mean. Let me close out of this window right here so that I can see the questions. So the first question related to the continuity of of education for our students are related to the question is, are schools required to provide any type of instruction during the closure during this time? And the Department of Education encourages all schools to provide some type of education in the most appropriate and accessible way possible. So however way that can be done, we want to make sure that our schools are doing everything in their possible power to provide those services to students. And what continuity options are available? Planned instruction. So schools are creating curriculums right now or continuing their curriculum that they've already have set, but providing flexibility on how it's going to be delivered through online or over the phone. And then there's also enrichment and review. So some schools have not decided to change their curriculum to online. They're just reviewing some of their information related to what was covered in the past few months, instructional materials, lessons, just using that this time as a review period for students, because you will have students that need to catch up. You have students that need to close that gap. So those continuity options are available. The next question is a school required to continue to provide FAPE to students during school closure caused by the COVID-19? So again, schools are advised to make every effort. They're advised to implement IEP services to the greatest extent possible. And then they're also advised to make individualized determination on whether or not, sorry, make individualized determination, meaning on an individual basis for the students, on whether or not those services will require compensatory ed. My pronunciation, excuse me. So what that means is if we're not able to provide these services either online or however format during this period, the school has to come to the table to identify how are these services going to be made up. Is it going to be made up over the summer? Is it going to be made up by adding additional services when school reopens? That has to be a conversation that schools have once we get to that point. Some more questions that we'll go over are our school districts or LEAs, local education agencies, for those of us who don't know, are they required to meet IDEA timelines? That's a big one for evaluations and re-evaluations and reporting. So LEAs should make every effort, again, to meet these federally and state mandated timelines, and that includes virtual conferences, virtual delivery so if you're doing an evaluation for students, can that be done virtually? If not, then what can be done outside of that face-to-face outside of that face-to-face assessment of students. So I know, for example, I'm working with a school right now, and we're doing virtual IEP meetings, which are going extremely well, and it's helping us to stay focused. It's also helping us to answer a lot of parents' questions in relation to what's next for our student, where should we expect, how is it supposed to go, how is it supposed to happen. So that can be done. It can be done over the phone. It can be done through Google Meet. And as Zoom is another one, and Zoom does has made several notifications about FERPA, so making sure that they're not violating their students' rights and information, and we're keeping that they're keeping that information secure. So Zoom is available for that. Does a school need to change the placement of students? So this is a big one, and I thank you for posing that question. For long-term exclusions, a district must consider placement decisions. So anything over 10 days. So for example, if your school was just closed and it's within that 10-day mark period, and then there was either there was services provided or there were no services provided. So if you have that 10-day period, you can at that point come to the table, and you should come to that table to decide what placements will be held. So if you're saying virtual services are going to replace the face-to-face services that you're delivering for your student, then that needs to be notified. So you need to create a notice of recommended education placement for that child. It doesn't have to be a formal IEP meeting at that point. If that happens, that's great. Like, I feel like those can happen, but it can just be written notification along with the parent to highlight how these services will be delivered and what times, what days, and so on, just being as specific as possible. So that way we are on the same page of the change of how these services will be delivered. And of course, placement decisions must be made by the IEP team. So if LEAs are school districts are providing instruction during this response effort, how do they respond to how should they respond to IEPs that are unable to implement as written? So this is a good one. If a school is unable to provide services to a student, and I'm going to put my pointer here for those of us who may not. If a school is unable to provide services to student with disability in accordance with their IEP, the IEP team must determine which services can be provided and to appropriately meet their students' needs, and they must continue to follow whatever policies that they have in regards to changing or amending their IEP, and of course, discussing compensatory services. So if you as a school district feel like nothing we can do right now, there's nothing we can do to provide these services to students, then the discussion has to be, what will compensatory services look like for the student once school reopens? We have to make every effort to make amendments to deliver these services. For example, if you have a student who is blind and part of their services is walks around the city so that they can learn how to cross the street and how to navigate the city, it's very difficult depending on the situation. If that student, you want to make sure that people are maintaining social distancing. So if those services are not able to be provided, then you have to decide, once school reopens, how can we make up that service? Do we need to do additional time for that student to make up what was lost? And of course, making sure you're accounting all of the time that may have been lost. And then the next question is, may an IEP team consider a distance learning plan in a child's IEP as a contingency plan? So should you create or should you put a distance learning plan in the IEP? So it says, yes, the IEP team may, but they're not required to. So they're not required to include distance learning plans to a child's IEP. That can be triggered in response to the closure. However, this information can be communicated in their notice of recommended education placement. So if you as a team want to include that in their IEP, then you can, but it is not required if it's not a total change of their IEP. If you're saying the distance learning plan is just to continue to implement their support through virtual or other means, then you can just put that in the way that you're delivering their services. However, if it's like a brand new plan or brand new something that had to be changed or amended to the student, then yes, I would recommend putting that in their IEP. So that way there's an amendment that we're all on the same page of what's changing and how it's changing. And Act 13, Ellen, so I just received some notice on that, so I can take a second to just read what was said about that so that I can make sure we're all on the same page with that. So there was communication related to notification of services. So they want to make sure that we are, again, providing ongoing response, ongoing communication with parents on how we are implementing all of the services. I'm pulling it up now. So yeah, so the information that I received just really related to making sure that we're continuously updating parents, and I will take some time at the end of this to go back to your question because I have to read and I don't want to hold up that time, but I do want to get to your question. Let me go to the next one. Oh, sorry. go back to the pointer. All right, so the next part talks about the compliance. So we got to make sure that we're keeping up with our timelines. So 60-day timelines for students related to evaluations, also timelines related to annual reviews. We want to do everything in our effort to make sure we're sticking with those timelines. It doesn't have to be perfect because these are unique circumstances, but we want to see that we are following guidelines, completing evaluations to a fullest extent, and also meeting virtually with our students. And then transition planning. So if you have a student right now who's in the 12th grade, they have to start planning about how they're going to transition to high school. And of course, we don't want to wait until everything is over to start planning for that. So we meet with those students over the phone, virtually, to discuss what will things look like after they transition from the school setting. And thank you. If technology, Ellen, you had another question. Thank you. If technology is now required to deliver the IEP, should we check the assistive technology box under special considerations on the IEP? Yes. So I would say definitely, because yes, it is assisting you in accessing the content. So please check off that. And of course, if a student needs technology, as far as like the students with IEP, in order to access the content, then it is on the school to make sure that they're providing that student with those resources. So they cannot mandate something that students do not have access to. So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page as to what's being mandated and giving students a fair and equal, equitable access to those resources. So thank you for that question. All right, so overall, what are our must-dos? Our must-dos: we must communicate with families, we must determine a distance learning plan, if any, because some schools are still, discussing whether or not they're going to do that. We must determine appropriate supports for our personnel. We must assess technology and distance learning needs for accessibility. So we just talked about assistive technology. So what do students need? Do they need a computer? Do they need a phone? Are we sending this information home? Do we have their address? So we have to determine like what needs for accessibility are needed. And of course, determining guidelines for virtual evaluations, virtual meetings. How are we doing it? When are we doing it? What's needed to implement these meetings and evaluations? And then of course, we must determine what provisions for compensatory services are going to be available. So what's next? If we can't provide these services, then what are we going to do about that? And how are we going to plan for the future when students do return back to the school? And these are just questions that we should be asking ourselves throughout the process. So what is appropriate with our current situation? Are we making every good faith effort to provide support to our students? Are you making efforts to tailor instructions to students that may have different needs? So if you have a student who does not have computer access, and for some reason maybe they're not able to independently use their laptops or computers, so it wouldn't make sense to even utilize that as much. What are other ways, or what are other ways that we can provide supports and tailor that instruction or tailor that lessons to those students? And of course, what level of student support is needed from the parents? So we got to make sure we're engaging our parents, because right now they are, like they're fully in it. Like they are homeschooling. They're doing what the teachers have been doing for years without all of the training and the resources that teachers may have. So we want to make sure that we're engaging them. They have to understand like what's happening, what's expected, and teachers should be supporting them ongoing. So not only working with students, but also consulting with our parents as to how they can continue these supports for students. And Alita says, should we progress monitor virtually? Yes. So document, 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 and I'm going to get to that as well. So make sure that you're still documenting instruction and support that are happening towards students' IEP goals. So yes, please progress monitor. And there are resources, and I can share some of those too, that students can log on and work on their IEP goals through those resources. thank you for that question. So the overall question, what are ways to provide services free and appropriate in a free, what are ways to provide free and appropriate education for diverse learners during our COVID-19 school shutdown? So let's get right into that. So as a school, we want to think about what is our distance learning implementation and how does that affect our free and our ways of engaging our students. So right now, the first step would be just a consensus, like what services are we doing, how are we implementing it, and having some consistency as to how they're implementing it. So once you create a distance learning plan, please make sure it's consistent and it is, has different ways of accessibility for students. You want to also have a family communication plan. So are we communicating with families daily? Are we doing it weekly? How are we communicating? Is it email? Is it phone call? There should be a set plan as to how we're communicating. And of course, parent notices of flexibility. So the Pennsylvania Department of Ed has provided a lot of great resources as flexibility notices that schools have tailored to send out that information to parents. So I think that that's excellent to make sure that you have something, or you can use what the state has provided for you and just tailor it to your school. So you want to make sure that parents are aware of the difference in how you're providing these services to students, what it's going to look like, and pretty much like how you would do a notice of recommended education placement. But this letter will add just some language in relation to the COVID-19 and our unique circumstance. Distance learning curriculum. So once if you've decided to do distance learning, what does it look like? Online learning, weekly or monthly packets. How does the curriculum what is the curriculum and how is it implemented? And then, of course, appropriate training for our parents and our teachers. We have to be trained on how to implement these services. Some of our teachers are not the most tech savvy. Some of our parents are not the most tech savvy. So they do need that level of training and understanding in order to have effective lessons for our children. So temperature check, I will skip over that one for now. Where are you in distance learning process? And let's get right into flexible distance learning. So I put together just some ways that we can implement flexible distance learning for our students. And one of my great friends has been working with me a lot on universal design learning. So if you're listening, whoop, whoop, thank you. And I do actually want to engage her, hopefully she can, in another webinar where we can share just ways that we can use universal design for learning and implementing distance learning lessons. So I think that would be a great webinar. So hopefully she can do it with me. Hopefully she's listening. So representation, what are flexible ways that we can represent our information to students? We can do it through pictures, we can do it through videos, we can do it through phone, we can do it audio, songs, dance, etc. So there are many ways that we can start representing information, the things that we want students to learn, just like what we've been doing in the classroom, but now it's like we might not be able to do it face to face, so we can share a picture with them. We can create an account with them and post information to our classes, like Class Dojo, like just other avenues of sharing information. So there's a variety of ways to represent information. And then there's also engagement, like how are we engaging our students? So social media is a great way to engage students, creating a classroom account, student accounts, so that way they can put information up there, daily posts, inspirational videos. Those are ways to keep students focused, engaged on what the challenge is, not necessarily what the challenge is, but just like what's going on. And of course, you can set challenges with them. I know that there's a lot going on Instagram about fun videos you could do at home. So that's something that you can give to your students, like, hey, post this thing that you're doing at home and share it with us. So those are great ways to engage. Of course, phone calls. We want to make sure that they hear a voice, they're checking in on them, morning messages to students. projects, academic points for just being a participant, for engaging in the conversations and discussion, giving them incentives for those points, sending home notes, just there's a variety of ways to engage our students flexibly. And of course, action and expression, like how do we want our students to show that they're learning and understanding the lessons and the materials that we're giving them. So that could be drawings, it could be poems, it could be songs, dance, videos, talk to text. Some students, because I know I prefer to talk to text to write my papers, or just different areas of different tools, assistive technology that they can use to express that they understand what is being provided for them. And of course, social posts. That way that you can post different, students can post up different activities or projects that they've done at home and share that with their family community. Those are just flexible ways to take the lessons and everything that you're doing in the classroom and keep your students engaged from different distances. And if you are currently doing some things right now, please feel free to share those in the chat box as well, of different resources and activities and strategies that you're currently using to engage your students. So the next part would be just adding into the different areas. So flexibility in curriculum. So our curriculum can be presented in online instruction, or other various platforms. It can be and it can be presented in weekly information, weekly packets delivered, whether it's email to the parents, U.S. Postal Services, or it can just be an ongoing project. So some schools and some classrooms have just like a huge project that students just have to do something every week to show that they are practicing this particular skill or putting this together. And at the very end, there's going to be some culminating project at the end. So that's another way to deliver your curriculum. Teacher phone calls. So teachers can be calling to review the work with students. They can also be doing read alouds over the phone, which are great, especially for our students that may be visually impaired. So it's nice, like you can read a book with them if you're saying, hey, can you read such and such, and then let's call and let's read, I'll call you and we'll read it together. You can also provide consultations over the phone. So please, help the parents out because we all need, like that support. Parents need the support. So if you can give them a call to walk them through what's going on, different strategies on what they can do to support their student at home, I'm sure it'll be useful for everyone. And of course, homework and assignment support. So if you're wanting to check in with students on how they're doing with their assignments via this phone call, video chat, email, having like if you're doing it virtually, then of course having an hour where students can log in and work with you. Virtual meetings will be the next part, and meeting for students with IEPs, also meetings over the phone with parents to go over different materials or go over their IEPs. That can be done as well. And then of course, schedules. So parents may need schedules and to help their students stay on track as to what should they do first, what's the best time for this. Some students are great in the morning, because I know I spoke with one parent. She said her daughter is awesome in the morning, and I think it was the opposite actually. No, she said her daughter is a struggle in the morning, but is great in the afternoon. So tailoring the schedule to that and helping the parents build out the schedule to better understand the best way to help their students. And of course, please continue to post any more that you may be doing. Some strategies for distance learning. So if you have a student right now who has a specific learning disability, there are some strategies, and these are just a few to help engage them in distance learning process. So we know that you want to continue practice on your skills. So if you're doing something or giving them activity where they pick one skill a week and every day they practice on that skill, that's a great strategy to help them really focus in on that and use additional time that they may have at home to work on that. Of course, using teacher consults, so consulting with the teachers and parents together to just discuss like what the practice skill is, what should they do, how are they doing on that. That's a great strategy to support students and as well as parents. Using at-home resources, so the students are at home now, so there's a lot of things in their houses that they could use to teach a lesson. So if you are outside in the backyard and you want to count some flowers and you're practicing your addition and subtraction, add 1 flower, take away 2 flowers, all of those things. Those are just things that different ways that you can use things in your home to support skills and support students. Visually impaired students, we talked about calling them up to read a book with them. Um, Deaf or hard of hearing students, we talked about video. Oh, we didn't talk about that, yes, but you can do lessons where if you record a lesson and you put the words, the caption at the bottom, that will be great for those students to still be able to access the lesson and just read the words and get support if needed to read through the content. And then of course, students that, these are just a few, but if you have a student that may have some kind of orthopedic impairment, then you can give them pictures or videos or just examples of different activities and just ways that they can make movements and physical activities, and then those students can do that as well. And then of course communicating with the parents as to how they did on those. So those are just some strategies for different students with different abilities and how they can use distance learning to engage. Here goes a sample schedule. I won't really go into detail, but I will be sharing this PowerPoint and just a schedule for parents that you can share with them, whatever way that is structured, so that parents can actually have that with them, and parents and teachers can discuss how the schedule is working for students and how long certain things are taken and so on. So that can be something that you share with parents. And of course, documenting effort. So you want to make sure that you're constantly documenting everything, because we want to show that we have done and we're continuously doing, supporting our students. So it's important that we document our communication, document our services to parents. We want to also document if you have a outside related service professional who's coming in and working with students, then please have them send you documentation or send you notes about the session, so that way everyone's on the same page as to what services students are being provided with. Here's an example of a instructional tracking log that schools can use, and that what that is that the dates, the ways that the lessons were administered to students, the resources that were being used, the goals that students were working on, of course, their response. And you also want to add in notes like, were parents, did a parent have to be a part of that one? Was the student able to do it independently? What level of support is needed for the next time you meet with that student to better help them access the content? So this is an example of a log that you can be utilizing with your students. And uplifting our students. So it's incredibly important right now that we make sure that we are uplifting ourselves first, because we got to be in a good space and a good place, but then of course uplifting our students. Right now they're dealing with a lot. This is all new to them. This is a very stressful situation. Some of the at-home circumstances may not be ideal, so you have you have parents and students that may be dealing with that. So we want to be able to embed just ways to uplift our students throughout our lessons. So those can look like quotes. I love quotes. I feel like quotes give you a great way to reflect on just where you are and just motivate you for what's next. We can do videos. You can film yourself. It's like a, hey guys, how you doing type of video, and share that with the students. Games and challenges are always fun. Challenge your students to doing a group game and everyone participate, everybody do it at this time, doing it through a video, or if it's a phone call or some way of engaging that student. Familiarity is another one. So finding a way to build that familiarity with students. Like this is what we did in the classroom last month. We're bringing it back again, but now we're going to do it differently. So just remind them that even though it's a different format, we're still in it together and we're still able to communicate together. Being present is incredibly important. So just making sure that you're in a good space, reflecting as to where you are as an educator, as a parent, and helping that you're just listening into that student as to what they may be going through. And of course, smile. If you feel good, you can help that student feel good. So don't forget to smile and laugh and do just different ways to provide them different ways to feel better about where they are, and remind them that things will get better because this is not permanent. It will eventually it will get better. And these are just some resources that I extracted information from. And it is, of course, the Center of Disease Control. That's where a lot of our information has been coming from. U.S. Department of Ed, Council of Exceptional Services, Pennsylvania Department of Education, National Center for Special Education for Charter Schools. That's like they've been doing a lot of advocacy work to ensure that students are still getting what they need. Office of Civil Rights and K-12 and Edgenuity are providing a lot of great free resources for schools and curriculums too. Like they help with actually building out a curriculum. So if you're at a school right now who is looking to transition to a distance learning curriculum, there are a number of resources for that. And I know that even with the delivery of it through, even if you deliver it through virtual, there are other ways, of course, that can be delivered to students, and the curriculum, of course, has to be flexible for that. And so there are more resources. My website, www.learnpotential.com, put together just 26 resources for home instruction for families. So that can be shared with families as well as to where to go. And teachers, of course, can utilize that as well to build resources to send home and also to use for themselves when they're building lessons for parents. And yeah, and then of course, questions. So I would like to go back to, and of course, as we go through this piece, please add in questions. I'll be sending this PowerPoint out to all of our everyone who registered, and I would love for those who registered to share that out with someone else too, because this information might be useful for another school district or another school leader who may have similar questions. So as I share it out, please feel free to share that too. And I believe, go back, so the Act 13 of, oh, let me see, I think I have one more question here. Okay, should we progress? Okay, so I'm gonna open it up here for any questions. If you don't have any questions, then I thank you so much, and I hope that this PowerPoint was useful, this presentation was useful as them to get a better understanding of where students are and what ways to best help students. I'll also be I'll be responding individually to some of us who may have more questions that they may come up later. So please feel free to email me. My email is gabriella.timothy@learnpotential.com, and my phone number 484-301-5399. Please feel free to reach out in that circumstance. And all right. So let's discuss that part. So I think what I'll do, because we only have the one question right now, Act 13. What can you tell us about Act 13? Okay. So what I'll do right now is, like I said, I was just reading into that before I put this all together. So if we're doing Act 13, I can actually look it up right now. So Act 13, for those of us, the proclamation on declaring a national emergency concerning the novel coronavirus disease. And it just spells out what schools are to do in an emergency, how that really impacts our students. And when you think about education, so I'll go back to that. When you think about education, the overall outline for that is just we should still be working to provide student services and in the safest way possible. So obviously most of our services cannot be done. Oh, thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Um, and please feel free to reach out. So most of our schools should still be making sure to provide those services to the safest extent possible. So I hope I was able to provide just some ways that we can do that without putting a student in danger, a teacher, parent, and so on. Because again, we have to just find different ways of being flexible because this is every week there's something new, there's a new communication. So I'll continue to make sure I am updating myself and updating everyone as to where we are and what we should be doing. And Ellen, thank you for these great questions. Due to the Zoom FERPA conditions you mentioned, are therapy services okay by Zoom? Yes. So therapy services are okay. And I currently have do Zoom through a therapy service as well. So as long as that therapy service or company that's providing the services connects with Zoom to be on the same page as to what services will be done and so on, then yes. So Zoom has communicated that they do follow FERPA and the outlines and that that you can provide therapy services through that avenue. Is it recommended that all students get ESY or a summer program? So that is dependent. Thank you, Joe, for that question. That is dependent on the LEA. So the school can determine, yes, all of our students are, we recommend all of them for ESY because we weren't able to provide this level of instruction. They weren't able to work on their IEP goals for extended amount of time. So yes, we want to make recommendations for ESY services. If parents and so on are not able to make those ESY services, then we have to consider how those services are going to be delivered and what it's going to look like for next year. So there is money in the budget for funding for summer services. So as we think about the stimulus package for stimulus package for schools and school districts, there is money that will be that can be allocated to providing a summer learning program for students. So yes, thank you for that. Thank you. So one of the questions is, do you know how much the stimulus funding is going to in each category, dollar amount? No, I know that it's a lot of money. I don't know specifically how, like the funnels as to what it was going to amount to for each school, but I do know that schools are getting money, and that can be used for those particular resources. So hopefully I answered all of the questions, and thank you everyone for attending the webinar. I really appreciate it. And I hope to do one on a weekly basis and having some additional panelists to discuss where they are in the process so that way we can continue to keep this conversation going. Thank you so much. I'm gonna try to see if I can stop this thing, but I don't know how I can. Showing. Okay, I'm gonna stop showing my screen. Like, okay. I'm gonna stop recording. All right. End the webinar. Okay, yes, I'm gonna end the webinar. Bye everyone. Thanks. Like,